Okay, relating to mechanical tension, dosage, i.e. volume. I thought older individuals required or needed less volume in training, but you were discussing the need for added volume, particularly in those that were anabolically resistant. Yeah, you done heard wrong. Yeah, this is like a fundamental disagreement with this like minimum effective dose, kind of like let's take it easy on the older individuals type thing. And we're not trying to victimize anybody. If you're older individual versus younger individual, I don't know that you need more or less volume. I expect both of you to respond about the same until proven otherwise. And if you're not responding to the training, then I think there's a problem either with the formulation of the training or the dose. And so if the intensity is correct for the adaptations we're selecting for, if the exercise selection is appropriate for your current preferences, trainability, adherence, all that sort of stuff, then I think the dose is wrong. And generally it's not too high unless you're suffering from like an overuse injury, you're reporting being fatigued all the time, you're, just constantly sore. If it's none of those things, then I think you're underdosed. And so if anything, I would expect an older individual to need more volume than a younger individual to see a response. But that's if they have anabolic resistance. If it's a 60-year-old person, 55-year-old person, or people who come on our Facebook group who aren't familiar with our material, they're like, I'm 38, I'm an old person, I need less training. We're like, 38's old, oh boy, like I'm in trouble. So yeah, I would expect most people, the recommendations for initial training to look about the same across most different population demographics, and then you're going to adjust from there based on their response. And so again, if people aren't cripplingly sore, super fatigued, reporting like overuse injuries or sort of new pain onset, you're thinking, all right, well, the dose isn't too high. It's probably, if anything, a little too low, as long as the formulation seems like something that they can do, their adherence is high. Anything else you want to put on there?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's maybe borderline hot take.
Hot take? Okay, yeah, let's get controversial, Baraki. It's been a minute.
I think this idea that older people require significantly less training volume results from an observation of those who train people, and their approach to training assumes that the only way to get stronger or to build muscle is for your training to be very, very, very hard.
Oh, yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah. The infantile view of like training.
Yes. That if it's not maximally hard, that it is not worthwhile or that it does not generate the adaptations you're looking for, right? And if you look at it through that lens, where in other words, if you're not taking it to RPE 9 or 10, of course, folks who espouse this view disregard the idea of RPE altogether. But if it's not just shy of failure or like the hardest set you've ever done, that it's not worth your time, it does not generate strength or hypertrophy, which is verifiably false based on the actual research on this topic. And I would argue, if you want to disregard research and just look at empirical experience, my own training, I haven't pulled anything over RPE 6 in my volume work.
Not even just you, just like older people.
We do this all the time with people.
Yeah.
But the idea that if the only valuable training is that which is very, very, very hard, right? If you take that assumption, then everybody requires less volume because nobody can tolerate that much volume if all the training is that hard, right? I've been there. I did training programs where all my sets, I had to take 15 minutes of rest between sets. I had to get ridiculously hyped up. I had to have the right song on. I had to hyperventilate before my sets, and I would still go and barely get out the last rep of the set, right? That's happened to both of us. So I think that it rests on a flawed assumption, right? If we grant the reality of this based on the evidence and our experience as well, that you can gain significant strength and you can get hypertrophy staying not just one rep, but multiple reps shy of failure, then all of a sudden this idea that you can't tolerate that much volume goes out the window, right? You can tolerate more work if it's not all maximally difficult. And that's what we observe across the age spectrum in the population that we work with. And so it frustrates me, this kind of narrative around older folks being, much, much, much more fragile, right? Because if you take them to RPE 10, if they're doing limit sets, then yes. But at the same time, if I took a 20-year-old to limit sets week in and week out, yeah, it doesn't take very long before they start feeling bad. And I'd say, oh, maybe you're, volume intolerant or volume sensitive or something like that, and you really need to back off. And
I don't know what that means.
It's incoherent.
Are you angry?
A little bit.
You mad, bro?
A little bit. Because, again, it's like older folks are those who stand to benefit the most
yeah.
from doing more. And
Yeah.
yet we're telling them you're fragile and you shouldn't be doing very much, right? So that's the idea of like, you can go real hard for like this one set and then just like take it easy the rest of the time, which is not the reality. It's not the message that we're trying to promote to anybody.
Yeah.
So if you understand the idea that you can gain productive adaptations across a wide range of loading intensities,
Yes.
you can stay multiple reps shy of failure
Yes.
and get adaptations, right? Then you can do plenty of sets, and that's all good, right?
Yep.
And then when, again, these studies specific to anabolic resistance get done, where we see muscle protein synthesis responses get blunted with fewer sets, and you can normalize their muscle protein synthesis response if you just do a couple more sets, right? Especially if those sets are a little bit shy of failure, it's no problem to do a couple more sets, and people can adapt to that. It doesn't mean we take a beginner who is 88 years old and has never trained before and say, yeah, you're gonna do 6 sets of 5 at like 70% of your 1RM today.
Well, single at 8 first. You gotta, yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Right? But it means that we don't set this arbitrary artificial barrier up front to them and say, you're never gonna be able to do more than like 2 sets of 3 in your training or something like that, right? We can work you up, you can adapt, right? Maybe the pace of adaptation is different than somebody who is at a different life stage or something like that, or doesn't have these medical conditions, but you can adapt, right? And working them up over time.
I'm just triggered on the inside from the underdosed training. It's like you're showing up to the gym and you're not doing enough work to get better, but it's still really hard, so you can't really do more.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're putting in the work. It's like, it's just frustrating. Yeah.
And ultimately, what also adds to this frustration is I often end up consulting with many of these people, not necessarily so many in the older demographic, but even guys in their 30s or 40s who were told that they had to go maximally hard all the time, and then they start to feel terrible, and then they go and they get their testosterone level checked, and of course it's not normal, right? Because they're in this bizarre state of like simultaneously over and under training, whatever. They're doing stuff that's too hard but not enough to adapt, right? They just feel bad, not sleeping well, mood's down, testosterone's low, and they're like, oh, I guess I just need testosterone. It's like, no, you just needed to train better.
Better training
More
program.
intelligent training approach, right? I deal with this all the time. I do these consults multiple times a month.
Well, the idea is that harder is better.
Yeah.
And that has like no upper bound. And it's like, that's not necessarily the case. If we're just talking about strength, then it needs to be hard enough, but no harder, and you need to do more of that stuff as much as possible.
Yeah.
And so if it's maximally hard, you can't do enough of it for it to matter, and the infinitesimal like improvement that you would get in fitness is massively outweighed by the fatigue.
I had a discussion on this topic on my platform with the overhead press that we did, where basically the concept is, let's say we take the RPE, the number of reps in reserve. You go from an RPE 7 to 8 to 9 to 10. The marginal increase in training stimulus that you get out of that approaches a flat line.
Yeah.
Right? In other words, you're not getting that much more benefit. Say you go from 8 to 9 to 10 on this set from a strength development or hypertrophy development standpoint. But the fatigue cost that you get from that is like exponential.
Yep.
Right? It skyrockets from 8 to 9 to 10. I could do singles at 8 every week, twice a week, and have no problems. But then, as Jordan said during that lecture, that one week, I went full send. I went to full RPE 10, and my deadlift performance went down by 150 pounds and was down there for multiple weeks before I got back to normal. And that was just the difference between an 8 to 10 RPE. And I'm like, I wasn't under any illusions that I got better stimulus from that effort. That was just fun, right?
Sure.
No regrets. It was worth it.
No random
But again,
regrets.
that stimulus difference that you get flat lines and the fatigue cost skyrockets. And calling that like somebody being in that situation and saying, oh, I guess I can't do any training volume. That's not the correct interpretation.
Would you put grandma on the barbell medicine beginner prescription?
I don't see why not.
Sure, yeah. I would too, obviously.
Her weights are going to be not artificially, but they're necessarily going to start quite low based on, her status. Of course, she is post-mortem at the moment, but we'll set that aside.
Come on, man.